everyone, to the last January edition of That's Football.
Yes, sir.
Boy, winter does not want to leave here, and it's 2 days before Groundhog Day.
Yeah, winter is giving us a nice little hard kick in the rear end right now.
It is definitely in Texas. We'll mention that a little bit later on the show when it comes to the XFL.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. We got a lot of ground to cover. Of course, we got a crazy NFL Championship weekend to recap. Of course, now a Super Bowl to kind of semi-preview since we got a couple weeks, as well as some non-NFL or non-playoff news to talk about in the NFL. And then, of course, we will have NFL writer and Hall of Fame voter Howard Balzer joining us yet again here in the second hour of the show. Senior content creator Rodney Davis here on the In the Zone Network is also going to be joining us, not only for this particular show in the first hour, but moving forward, we're gonna have ourselves a third wheel to the wagon here. Rodney's gonna be joining us moving forward. Obviously, gonna continue to add to our football coverage across the board. So before he comes on, I guess the big takeaway from me this weekend was that the picks that I made here last week didn't really pan out that well. That's kind of where I'll start, man. So I rocked my orange and black for Joe Burrow last week. Bengals were definitely a letdown. And then, of course, the Eagles, they pounced all over the 49ers given the whole, quarterback situation that went down in that game. So I kind of flip-flopped on my picks going into, like Sunday morning, Sunday midday. And then, of course, I finally tweeted that I was changing my picks slightly. I kept the 49ers on the NFC side, and then, of course, flip-flopped to the Chiefs on the AFC side by the time game time started. Primarily because, and I guess we can talk about Philly and San Fran first, since that's probably the shorter game to cover. I thought San Francisco was going to obviously not lose both of their quarterbacks that were active for the game. And then, of course, next thing I know, Hassan Reddick is coming off the edge with, one-on-one with a tight end, and he led the league in sacks this year. So Kyle Shanahan strikes again, man. What can we do?
Boy. This game, unfortunately, out of the two, this was lackluster due to injuries, man. Once Brock Purdy got injured, then, the XFL quarterback Josh Johnson got in, and then it
went downhill immediately, man. So, I'm sitting here, I'm watching. Obviously, I'm loving the energy that the Eagles start out with. Of course, they benefit on that first drive from that fourth down catch by Devontae Smith that actually turned out to not be a catch once we actually got in to review it. And then Philly, they didn't really do a whole lot between their first drive of the first half and the last drive they had that they scored on in the first half. I will say I did take the Eagles' first half team total over 10.5 points on the betting line. So nice little win from Sunday outside of my predictions. But Philly, man, they turned out to be the same juggernaut that we thought they were against the Giants. Granted, you can't prepare for, you can prepare for the injury, but you weren't necessarily prepared to watch that game without Brock Purdy or Josh Johnson. You definitely expected the 49ers to have a healthy quarterback of some sort. Now, one thing that I do want to get your thoughts on, Will, I saw this floating around on the internet a little bit, also in a couple of different group chat texts that I'm in. Is this the curse of Colin Kaepernick?
I don't know if it's a curse of Colin Kaepernick, but it was just extremely bad luck.
I mean, at this point, everything that goes wrong for the 49ers is some type of injury to a quarterback or some type of terrible play by a quarterback.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if it's full-blown curse of Kaepernick or if it's just the curse of Kyle Shanahan. But to be on your fourth-string quarterback and then for him to go down, it's just there you could see right then and there was nothing else that they could do the rest of that game to keep it close. Josh Johnson tried, but it was only so long that the Eagles were going to give him.
Yeah, man. You're just wondering, for a moment, like Josh Jones was doing good, then he got hit, then Brock Purdy had to come in, and he had, I believe, some type of shoulder injury.
Well, so he actually, it turns out, he tore his UCL. So essentially the same injury Josh Allen had, but worse. He had a complete tear of it as opposed to like a strain or sprain, however they want to classify it. So he's apparently, like, this is essentially like having Tommy John surgery for a pitcher. He's going to be out for about 6 months. Now, from the 49ers aspect, apparently Trey Lance will be back healthy by the time OTA starts, so they're not going to be completely without a quarterback. And he's probably the biggest winner of everything that played out on Sunday because he knows he has a job to come back to now, as opposed to the opposite end of this where Brock Purdy would have been leading him to a Super Bowl and potentially taking his job. So you probably, deep down somewhere, it's a little bit bittersweet, but sweet nonetheless if you Trey Lance. So San Fran, of course, hell of a season from them.
They overperformed, in my opinion.
I mean, when you think about having to start, the last pick in the draft for 10 games, and, well, I guess 11 if you count Sunday, going 10-1 in those 11 games, you definitely overachieved. That defense was every bit of outstanding. We'll bring up here in a little bit why there might be some questions about that defense moving forward. But defense was outstanding. It was just only so long that they were going to be able to hold up against Philly having to go on short field every single time. So Philly, though, of course, congratulations to them winning the NFC Championship, 31-7. Second trip for them to the Super Bowl in the last 5 years. Have now done this under two different head coaches. Doug Peterson was able to do it for him 2017-2018 when they beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl. And, of course, Nick Sirianni doing this now in just his second year on the job. I also throw this to you. Do you think this is a result of just how talented the Eagles are, or do you also think that they've kind of benefited a little bit from easy schedule? Because I've seen that theory floated around on the internet as well.
If we're talking about this game specifically, because if there wasn't an injury to Brock Purdy and a few other of the players, and it's hard because when they face KC, I'm going to say big game so we don't get some copyright or anything by the NFL here. So it's just that hopefully with that matchup a little bit later on, because it's kind of hard for me to tell, like, Eagles are going to do well here. I do know that our guest last week, Ashley Baker, is hoping that the KC beats the Eagles.
Oh, yeah. I think every Cowboys fan is kind of upset, like, well, damn, we had to go and deal with this 49ers defense on the road. Brock Purdy stayed in the game, and then sure enough falls apart in the first drive.
Right now, KC is like this decade's version of New England Patriots because they're
essentially
there again and again and again.
Yeah, every single year. Yeah. And so, maybe the Eagles can turn into that on the NFC side. I got my hesitations about making that a full-blown prediction, but, they got a lot of talent on their team, man. Fletcher Cox, Hassan Reddick, you still got Brandon Graham on their defense, Robert Quinn, and Ndamukong Suh. And obviously him and what's my man, Linval Joseph. Those are guys they brought in mid-season. Not to mention, Darius Slay, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, James Bradbury in the secondary. So defense is amazingly talented. Of course, just as many talented players on offense when you think about Jalen Hurts, who's obviously MVP candidate, A.J. Brown, Miles Sanders, Devontae Smith. The list goes on, right? Hell of a talented team, man. I do have some questions about just, like, for them, this is now, like, basically 6 weeks in a row where they haven't really had to, like, sweat a game out. How does that translate, like, 2 weeks from now, having to play in literally the biggest game there is when you haven't had to take a game serious for, like, a month and a half? That's something that I would be a little bit nervous about if I'm an Eagles fan.
Yeah. Then, of course, one quick question, though. Do you think if the Eagles do lose and Sue only has that one ring, is he a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think it's also a little bit different, right? So, like, the Football Hall of Fame is literally the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So like this would be easier if this were like the basketball Hall of Fame because they induct people regardless of like what level they were great at. It would be a little bit easier if you could also loop in the years that Sue was at Nebraska because that it's kind of the same thing we saw with like Jadeveon Clowney at South Carolina. It's just a wrecking ball.
Sue is still the only defensive lineman that was a finalist for the Heisman.
I'm pretty sure that's the case. Somebody can probably correct us if we're wrong on that, but that just lets you know like he was a different type of animal
and
as a D tackle.
I will say this: if the new coaching does not do well in Nebraska, do not be surprised if Sue wants to come in Nebraska and take either helm or be part of the coaching staff for Nebraska.
Oh yeah, I imagine he's gonna get involved with his alma mater in some way, shape, or form when it's all done. Which I mean, to be quite honest, might be after this year. There was also some moments early in his career where I didn't think I would be saying, Ndamukong Suh, 13, 14-year NFL veteran, but here we are, right? Yeah. So, hell of a job by him, and again, hell of a job by the Eagles as they are now Super Bowl bound here in 2 weeks in Arizona. And so, NFC kind of shook out according to plan. AFC is a little bit different story. Of course, we had the whole talk all week long about Patrick Mahomes, whether or not his ankle was going to be, 100% ready to go, what that was going to look like for the Chiefs if he wasn't 100%. He answered those questions real quick, and basically had one of the best games of his career, winning that 23-20 against Cincinnati. I realized after we made our picks last week, as we got a little bit later in the week, Thursday, Friday, I just kept seeing, people calling Arrowhead Burrowhead. You got, a lot of guys talking up, how Cincinnati is kind of not necessarily looking past the Chiefs, but they were a little bit too cocky. And at some point, I understand having confidence, especially with a team where going into that game on Sunday that had beaten them 3 times in a row. Definitely get the confidence, but at some point, confidence gotta stay in the area of confidence and not disrespect. And I think at some point we started to disrespect the Chiefs just a little bit. And we saw the results, man. Patrick Mahomes is out there doing Patrick Mahomes things come Sunday.
Yeah, but do you want to put any factor into the officiating that we saw on last Sunday?
So I will say this. Do you want the referees deciding the game for you? No, not at all. The late, or not late hit, but the unnecessary roughness from the late hit on Mahomes, though, you just got to be smarter than that. Even if you don't think it's late, you just got to err on the side of caution just because of the fact that it's Patrick Mahomes you're pushing. This is one of the league's premier quarterbacks, if not the premier quarterback. You just got to let that one ride and see if your defense can make a stop. Because at that time, they had 8 seconds left. They were around the 40 to 43-yard line. It's like a field goal in the mid to high 50s in terms of yards. Maybe they get another playoff, maybe they don't, whatever. But I think if you are, I think Osai was the linebacker that was chasing Mahomes. You just gotta let that play ride, let him go out of bounds on his own, and live to see another play rather than 15 yards and then the game-winning field goals right there in your face.
Yeah, the one thing I'm talking about is they basically gave KC a do-over on third.
Oh well, yeah. Now that, look, I don't really know how to explain that. Now. I've seen some people who are Kansas City fans try to say that, well, yeah, they got a first down after that, but the Bengals ended up getting a stop, okay, what have you. I get that. The problem isn't necessarily that Cincinnati got the stop. It's also the fact that when the Chiefs got that first down, there's more time able to run off the clock. So now if you Joe Burrow and that Cincinnati offense, yeah, you might be able to get the ball back, but you operating with maybe a minute and a half less time than you would have normally. I could definitely see it on both sides. But, Cincinnati, man, they also had chances to win that game. Burrow threw 2 interceptions at pretty big moments in that game. it really was down to the wire. I can't blame it solely on officiating for the Bengals as to why they lost, especially given the slow start that they had on offense against that Kansas City defense, which do have to give them a shout out. They were able to get home with that pass rush on Joe Burrow as well, whereas the week prior the Bills were not able to do anything remotely close.
Yeah. The one thing, of course, I will say that, of course, at the end, the offensive line for Cincinnati was kind of failing Joe Burrow because that has been a continuing problem.
Yeah.
Though it has increasingly got better since his rookie year. Though, it just that, let me be clear, some, not all you Chiefs fans,
Right.
are coming a little bit. That's why a lot of people are hoping the Eagles to win.
Well, and it's funny you said basically they are like the new Patriots for us here in like the 2020s. Last 5 years they've been in the AFC Championship. Not only all 5 years, but they've hosted it each of the last 5 years. This is now Super Bowl appearance number 3. Won one, lost one of the previous 2, obviously. I don't really know what it's going to take to stop them at this point. You thought losing Tyreek Hill was going to do it, and sure enough, Tyreek Hill was still down, and Miami doing great things, and what Patrick Mahomes is still able to put up MVP numbers without him. So, is it going to take for him to lose Kelsey? Maybe. But even then, I'm pretty sure Mahomes is going to find another tight end or another wide receiver to prop up at this point.
Yeah, and then, of course, we got a few storylines when it comes to the big game, and we'll mention that about the Kelsey, or more than one, if you will.
Oh, yeah. We are going to have a Kelsey brothers face-off.
Yeah, but the difference is it's not like if everyone remember when the Rams were still here back in, I believe it was 2012 when Chris Long played for the St. Louis and defensive end.
Kyle Long.
Kyle Long played for Chicago Bears as a guard, and I was at that game actually, and Howie Long actually came to that game.
Yeah.
So that was actually quite a good sight.
Well, also very funny that you mentioned football dads, because did you get a chance to see the video of Pat Mahomes Sr. at the game?
I did a little bit.
Hey, look.
I prefer him over his brother.
Oh, absolutely. 1,000%. Pat Mahomes Sr. needs to be protected at all costs. Let's just say that.
His dad's fine. His brother and his wife, on the other hand.
Yeah, my man said he was out there smoking at Joe Burrow on Sunday. So he, needless to say, gave me the vibes of like your hood mechanic, where he is like, just kind of, he might have had a beer or two in him. Again, he might have been smoking a regular cigar, maybe a medicated one, depending on, where he was at. But, Pat Mahomes Sr. was everything we needed on Sunday, lighting up the victory cigar there in the fourth quarter and telling us all about it during the celebration on the field after the game. So, definitely a lot to look forward to coming out of this. Now, also, question that I have for you as it pertains to the Chiefs. Mm-hmm. Do we think Patrick Mahomes had a high ankle sprain?
High ankle sprain, like it's taped up like he did have a high ankle
sprain. So, I guess let me preface it with this. I believe there is a world. I don't know if they did this. I'm not accusing them of anything that would be, dishonest or anything along those lines. The Chiefs are an upstanding organization. Let's put that out there. But I do think there is a world where, Andy Reid, medical staff, they look up and they say, you know what, Patrick Mahomes, your ankle's good to go. But we're going to tell everybody else that it's iffy. Tell him it's a high ankle sprain. We don't know if he's going to be ready to play or he's battling through it. It's, super painful. And get a team like the Bengals who was already, they had won 3 straight against you. They might let that guard down a little bit, which, to be honest, looked like they did. Just saying. And, and to his credit, too, he didn't do a whole lot of running around and moving around early in the game, but when they needed it on that last touchdown drive, he gave it to them.
Yeah, and I will say, because if I remember correctly before the game, he had 4 to 5 hour treatment.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stem.
Yeah. A lot of stem on that ankle.
And then we'll see how the ankle or whatever he's had
Right.
within a 2 weeks of rest, though. The question is how much that injury got aggravated Sunday.
Well, so the reason I also asked, was it really a high ankle sprain? I heard them say right before kickoff he did not get a shot before the game.
Well, let's be clear. That doesn't mean that the team is honest about that.
Well, so that was going to be my next point. If we don't know that they were honest about the shot, maybe he didn't need one after all. Maybe he did need one and they gave it to him early in the week instead of on game day. Who knows?
Or Mahomes just like...
He could also just be alien.
Stay quiet and just play through the pain. Because you got that whole mental toughness and stuff. As someone that has had a broke ankle, this was during game, not after. Because like sometimes it doesn't. You know it's there, but you just can't feel it.
Yeah, and I think of course, adrenaline rush. He's moving around out there. At some point, that pain probably is kind of out of sight, out of mind type of thing, but. I had to question it just a little bit. It's kind of, I said before we came on air here that are we going to call this the Mahomes, the ankle game, kind of like we called the flu game for Jordan, even though it was technically food poisoning. Maybe it could have just been, a regular ankle sprain instead of a high ankle sprain. We never know. But shout out to Patrick Mahomes now for 3 Super Bowl appearances in 5 years.
Yeah, so of course, everyone in the sports media did try to put more on Mahomes than on Joe Burrow because people like Joe Burrow.
We're all Joe Burrow fans.
Sports media or any type of media wants to put a fall for grace on somebody.
Gotcha.
It's just like, oh boy.
Well, and I mean, think about the narrative from just a week ago, right? Because even I was doing it, right? I didn't go as far as saying Joe Burrow was the best quarterback in the league, Dan Orlovsky. But, I thought they was going to come out here and win because Joe was just that cool against the Bills.
Yeah.
And, they were talking about Mahomes off this ankle injury as though he was like Larry Holmes in his last fight. Like, it wasn't that type of decline, man.
And it's not like the disgrace Will mention this that Georgia quarterback Stetson Bennett had over to this.
Yeah, which I guess we can save it for college, or you can kind of just throw it in real quick now. But that was weird to me. My man was out drunk, apparently. Just living life.
That hurt his draft stock.
What little draft stock he had. I think he's probably going to be a backup quarterback at best for a lot of teams anyway.
So undrafted free agent, though, he could come. As we did for previous weeks, there has been some that have been coming to the XFL and USFL, so that is a possibility.
I mean, Stetson Bennett, too, you win you a couple national championships down at Georgia, you might be set for life. I'm just saying. He might not ever have to leave Athens again, even after this. So he might be set, man.
Yeah, you never know now because of all the NIL deals.
Yeah, that's a different story for a different time, man.
There's no longer any need for under the table-ness, if you will.
Oh no, we don't have to hide this anymore. You know why we're here. We dropping the bag right here on the table. You accept it or you don't, baby.
Well, at least the difference now the government takes a percentage. No.
Right, get taxed on it. Huh? Now, also, I guess we got this big game set, Super Bowl 57. We mentioned that this is going to be a battle between Kelsey brothers. Jason Kelsey, the offensive lineman for the Philadelphia Eagles. We got Travis Kelsey, tight end for the Kansas City Chiefs. First time we've had 2 brothers face off in the Super Bowl. We also
player-wise, coaching-wise, remember we got the Harbaugh Bowl.
Yes, we did get the Harbaugh Bowl, San Fran and Baltimore. But this is the first time that players, brothers, are matching up. And this is the first time we get matchup of brothers of another sense in terms of 2 black quarterbacks matching up in the Super Bowl for the first time. So fitting enough that that's going to fall during Black History Month here in a couple weeks. So shout out to Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes for making history there. And then, of course, it is also the Andy Reid Bowl, which I made the joke on Twitter that it should just be called the Andy Reid Bowl, sponsored by Waffle House. Because, I mean, Andy Reid was the Philadelphia Eagles coach, I believe, for 14 seasons.
I don't know. Reid might be more of an IHOP guy. I'm not too sure.
I'm not going to lie. The little play sheet he had the Waffle House looking menu on there. He seemed like Waffle House is more his vibe. I'm just saying. Yeah. Andy Reid seemed like more fun type than IHOP offers.
From someone that has gone to 2 places, they're probably more IHOP because of more of the better deal, in my opinion. But anyway,
I want all of the vibes that Waffle House offers. I need it all.
Well, maybe not that fight that was finally shown to you.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to do that. Don't want to promote violence at the Waffle House, but the food.
Strangely, there's a lot of violence at Waffle Houses. I don't quite understand.
Well, I mean, you gotta think about who's going to the Waffle House and win. Most of the time, the Waffle House altercations are happening like after midnight, baby. Because
the thing is, like IHOP, there's not really much. You honestly, you do expect it from a Denny's for some reason. I don't know why, but for some reason, it's always at a Denny's.
Yeah, Denny's, you might expect a thing or two to go down.
So I don't know. So let's see here.
And so I guess kind of transitioning to some non-playoff NFL news here. We got a couple coaching hires came out today. I guess it kind of came out back to back here. DeMeco Ryans is finally going to accept the head coaching vacancy that belonged to the Houston Texans, getting a 6-year head coaching contract. We do not know the details of how much that is for, but going from being the 49ers defensive coordinator to now the head coach for the Houston Texans, franchise that he actually played for in his playing career. And so we've heard a lot of good things about DeMeco Ryans, leader of men, how much of a motivator he is, does now get his chance to be first-time head coach for the Texans. Any expectations for him out of the gate from your end as far as how he might be able to get the Texans turned around?
Well, let's see here. They fired Lovie Smith, that's defensive-minded, then they hired defensive-minded. So
yeah.
It's not that I'm happy for DeMeco, just like, honestly, they might need to stop more on offense. But to be fair, DeMeco, of course, who played also for Alabama.
Yeah.
So, honestly, they're going to do a 3-4. Or some type of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, he's also part of that Shanahan coaching tree now. I'm sure because I also expect them with the second pick to draft a quarterback in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really think there's any running back worth in the first round this year.
Well, you got Bijan Robinson from Texas, which I know you're not supposed to take running backs in like the top 10 anymore, but he, from a skill set standpoint, might be worth it. They got picks, I believe, 2 and 12 in the first round. So I don't know if 12 is going to be too high for them to take a running back, but I definitely think that would not be a nice start to get your quarterback of the future and get a running back like Bijan in the first round. But that might be biting off a little bit more than what the Texans are willing to chew on that front. J.J. Watt, of course, was super excited about the hire. There was some rumors that, based on his tweet, the picture that he put up with him and DeMeco Ryans from their playing time together in Houston, that he might be joining the coaching staff for DeMeco Ryans. That has not been confirmed in any way just yet, but I guess would be fun to see J.J. Watt go immediately from player on the field this year to coaching on DeMeco Ryans' staff next year.
Yeah, that's actually quite quick, though. Of course, we never knew what J.J. Watt's coaching aspiration was even as a player, so this is kind of new. So it is a way, because he still lives in Houston, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So
yeah. JJ's been there for he's entrenched.
Yeah, and that would be more convenient. Also start this way, so more likely he will be a D-line coach. So.
Yeah, I would hope he's not jumping the line straight to defensive coordinator, but I mean we
maybe started off assistant probably.
We've seen stranger things though.
So he's not going to the teleprompter or teleplay or commentator route as most quarterbacks do now, and we'll see if Tom Brady does that here soon.
Yeah, I mean he's got a $300 million deal waiting for him from Fox at some point whenever he decides to cash it in. Let's see if it's this offseason. So you got DeMeco Ryans confirming that he is going to Houston. The other big head coaching move of the day, Sean Payton, is going to be the new Broncos head coach.
At a cost.
It was a pretty penny to pay for his services. The Broncos gave up their first-round pick that they had in this year's draft that was acquired in the Bradley Chubb trade here at the trade deadline during the NFL season, as well as a second-round pick in next year's 2024 draft in order to get Sean Payton, and then a third-round pick from the Saints in next year's draft as well.
Yep. So, and this is the first time that coaching rights has been traded since the John Gruden and Tony Dungy for Raiders and the Buccaneers. Or am I thinking of a different one?
Well, I think Gruden got traded. I think Tony Dungy had already moved on to Indianapolis at that point.
Okay. So yeah, I'm thinking. Oh yeah, Gannon and Gruden. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So.
And strangely enough, then they met for the Super Bowl, but Tampa Bay won. So that was an interesting story, of course. Then again, the year after that, the Raiders had to suffer through the Tuck rule. That's no longer in existence.
Now, I guess, do you think Sean Payton is going to be able to turn Russell Wilson back into a legitimate quarterback?
The question is it's not if he can do it. The question is, what does the new ownership want to do? Because I think from what I saw, there was a report that maybe they're a little bit tight with their money right after buying the team just here.
Well, and I mean, tight with their money after also giving Russell Wilson a Brinks truck, essentially.
Which wasn't their whenever. That
well, yeah, I guess their
decision.
That was not their decision. You do have a point there. So
we don't know. Like the question, I would like to know in an interview with the new owner, that of course is Stan Kroenke's brother-in-law, part of the Walmart family. Yeah. Like what? Like how much did they have with that Russell Wilson trade? That is my question, because that was before the sale was final, and they couldn't make any decisions. As any other type of business, they can't really fully take control until it's fully done, accepted, blah, 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 blah.
Now, I think, again, I'm not quite as familiar with how this works on the NFL side, but the NBA, the Phoenix Suns, are also kind of going through sales similar to the way that the Denver Broncos did as well. To my knowledge, new ownership until the sale is finalized cannot be involved in any of the player personnel transactions. That just to my knowledge. So I would love to know what their thoughts are on the fact that, on the previous regime's way out, they just gave Russell Wilson this boatload of money and said, "Okay, here, you're the quarterback forever," in Denver, basically.
Yeah.
So tough deal for them. But I do think Sean Payton is able to come in there and get that thing turned around. I'm interested to see who he hires on his staff.
Yeah, because one person we know that's out is former Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, who just after 24 hours of being let go, he gets hired for the Los Angeles Chargers offensive coordinator.
And I was so confused because I saw, of course, they fired him literally as the NFC Championship, the AFC Championship game concludes. I thought the timing was weird. I thought you probably could have just done it right after your game last week instead of waiting another week. I also think that it should be a little bit alarming to the Cowboys that you fired him on a Sunday evening and he had not just one, but 2 job interviews the following morning and had a new job by that afternoon.
I can't recall. Does the NFL have tampering rules, or is that more NBA?
So I do believe the NFL, they have tampering rules. I do not think that pertains to coaches. That's kind of the weird gray area. Tampering pertaining to players, yes.
Think about that here in the next owners meeting.
Well, and I mean, I guess too for their perspective from an offensive coordinators, I don't know that they have the same type of Rooney Rule in place for your coordinator staff the same way that you do your head coach. So, might be able to bypass that a little bit. I like the hire a lot for the Chargers. I think it's definitely going to impact Justin Herbert in a positive way. I think, getting a Kellen Moore who's going to be a little bit less hesitant to take shots down the field, may open it up a little bit more, kind of cater to what Justin Herbert's good at, as opposed to just letting him dump off to Austin Eckler for 10, 12 plays a game. But I like the hire for them. I'm interested to see what that means now, though, for the Cowboys because apparently Mike McCarthy is going to go back to calling plays, but they still are going to hire an offensive coordinator. Not really sure how that's going to go.
Oh, boy.
But nonetheless, Kellen Moore is on his way from Dallas to Los Angeles. Also on the coordinator front, Dolphins hired Vic Fangio as their new defensive coordinator. Of course, Fangio was the Broncos head coach just a year or so ago before the disastrous hire that is now Nathaniel Hackett.
And then Hackett just get hired as an OC just recently, too?
Yes, so Nathaniel Hackett is now going to be the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets.
That's something we could talk to Mike Mitchell about next week.
Yes, and of course, further fueling the rumors that they might be a trade partner for the Green Bay Packers when it comes to landing Aaron Rodgers, which of course Hackett and Rodgers worked together for a couple years there in Green Bay after Hackett's stint with the Jaguars. So
that's funny about that. He's fallen his predecessor Brett Favre in a way.
So I thought I was the only one that was kind of like laughing at this when some of these rumors started to come out. It was like, damn, like you really are just going down the literal exact same path as the guy you sat behind for 3 years.
Well, hopefully he doesn't get arrested for taking public funds.
We would hope so. We would hope so.
No, of course, difference is Rodgers, he owns a few of the, I think he owns a percentage of the Bucks, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so does own a minority stake in the Milwaukee Bucks NBA franchise as well. So speaking of Aaron Rodgers, he did mention that apparently these trade conversations are happening without him being involved, which... Not sure how much I believe that, but I do think that just trade the man. Just trade him. Clearly, Aaron Rodgers has not demonstrated that he's just like loving being in Green Bay the past couple years. Just trade him. Find you a trade partner. Get back, a pick or two, however you got to do it. But start fresh because even with Aaron Rodgers on their roster, like they didn't make the playoffs this year. And judging by the NFC now, it's not the greatest conference in football by any means. I think the AFC is definitely better. But at the same time, you've got a lot more teams in the NFC that will probably be willing to go for it next year. And not to mention that, this is a team that finished like third in their own division last year, which would have probably been a crazy thought coming into the season last year. So just go ahead, cut your losses, cut your ties, and let Aaron Rodgers find him a new place to play. He's going to have suitors. Those suitors I'm sure will be willing to give you the draft compensation that you're looking for. Go ahead, take it, move on. Because I think that will just be the better outcome from both sides. I think the Packers should want to move on. I think Aaron Rodgers definitely wants to move on based on some of the comments he's made recently.
It'll be interesting, of course, then. I don't know what the Packers are going to do because Love doesn't seem that capable to me, but...
Yeah. Look, I was on the side of just shutting down Aaron Rodgers last year and letting, Jordan Love get the last 3 or 4 games just to kind of show you what he's made of. Clearly that didn't happen because they ended up, finding themselves back into the playoff hunt. But, I don't know, man. I guess they try to trade Jordan Love too. If they, if they can't figure the whole quarterback thing out, maybe they play. I don't know. From what we've seen though, outside of what team were they playing? I don't think it was the Eagles. Maybe Sunday night football game. I'm thinking of. Aaron Rodgers gets hurt. They don't come back to win the game, but Jordan Love is able to kind of get them a couple scores late in that game. It's the best he's looked in the last 2 or 3 years. You did also spend a first-round pick on him, so at some point you gotta see what you invested in, unless you're seeing it on a daily basis and you're cutting your losses already, because that could also be the case.
Yeah, I don't think they really have that good of a draft capital either. So.
No, and that's why that's what I'm saying. Like just trade Aaron Rodgers and get what you can for him because, again, if to me, there's no point in having an Aaron Rodgers making, 40, 50, almost $60 million after bonuses and things like that. There's no point in having him if he's not able to uplift your team anymore, which, again, clearly, based on what we saw last year, he wasn't able to do that. That was a team that had limited weapons on offense, and they looked like a team that not only had limited weapons, but had a slightly limited quarterback in terms of his ability to get the ball where he was able to get it in previous seasons. So, I think for what they need right now, a Rodgers trade would definitely benefit them. And I think for what Rodgers can do still, there's probably a better team, i.e. the Jets, that could kind of make do with what he's still great at, as opposed to trying to put it all on his back. Because, of course, you got a young team, both offensively and defensively with the Jets, but a team that might also be a little bit better equipped from a weapon standpoint to be in the hunt, as opposed to, this Packers team that was just kind of scotch taping, offensive weapons together the entire season. So, in other quarterback news, which I'm sure we'll probably hit on this with Howard Balzer later in the show as well, Kyler Murray is not expected to be ready for the start of the 2023 season, coming off of that ACL tear that we saw here late in the season on Monday Night Football. Probably not a surprise to anybody. I don't think, based on the timing of that injury, anybody really expected him to be ready for the start of the season. I do think this gives the Cardinals a little bit of leeway in terms of them being able to kind of use, what is at least going to start off as probably a down year to maybe get some more good draft picks in that building, boost the talent on the roster. Tough not to have Kyler, but also, again, I think a situation that they probably were a little bit more prepared for than the folks on the outside looking in and kind of receiving this information yesterday.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting because now I forgot who's the backup for the Cardinals after.
It was Colt McCoy. I don't know if Colt McCoy is going to keep playing. Maybe he does, knowing that he'll be able to start next season as the quote-unquote starter.
He's got a few more years because he's in the same age as Chase Daniel, too.
And shout out to both of them, man. Just continuing to collect this backup quarterback money for years and years on end.
Yeah, more than – because remember back then with that draft class, you would think, Tim Tebow was going to get the most, but nope.
No, Tim Tebow turned out to be furthest thing from NFL quarterback.
Then again, Tim Tebow did just make it to the College Football Hall of Fame, but –
Now, college quarterback, he was elite. And I don't mean that in terms of just like raw throwing ability or anything like that, but in terms of just being able to boost the play of the folks around him, he was definitely elite as a college football player. So, tying up a couple of loose ends on the coaching front, don't think we had this news last week on the show, but Frank Reich is, of course, going to be the head coach for the Carolina Panthers. Unfortunately for our friend Steve Wilks, man, just getting shut out of the job again, unfortunately. However, Wilks is, while he's not the head coach for the Carolina Panthers, he is going to get an interview to be the new defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers now that DeMeco Ryans is no longer going to be there.
Now, here's the thing. I know there was, a disparity, I don't think it would be that bad if it was hired by someone else that didn't just get fired from a head coaching position. Because even I'm like, why him? There's a reason he was fired from the Indianapolis Colts.
Well, and this is tough because I don't like defending the decision making here, but the one defense I guess you can give Frank Reich is he was in Indianapolis 5 seasons. He had 5 different quarterbacks off, of those years. Some of that was his own choosing. Some of that we would think is the front office or, Jim Irsay, the owner. He at least, though, in that same amount of time showed you that regardless of what the quarterback situation was, he can at least get the most out of his roster. This year, obviously not so much, but if I'm being 100% honest, I don't know how many teams could have turned that Colts team or how many coaches could have turned that Colts team around this year.
Yeah.
So, Personally, I think Steve Wilks did enough to earn the job as the permanent head coach. I can also see why, Carolina's looking at like, hey, we don't know what our quarterback situation is going to look like. We need a coach that can come here and coach around that. I can understand why they landed on Frank Reich. I could also understand why people feel like he didn't necessarily get a fair shake this final year in Indianapolis as well, given, again, while it wasn't a great success, the success he was still able to pull off, shuffling in different quarterbacks every year. So I can see both sides of it. I really would have liked for Steve Wilks to get that job. I really would love for Steve Wilks to get a head coaching job of any sort at this point. Obviously, the jobs are winding down. He's definitely not going back to Arizona. So, I think it would be great for him to go and be the 49ers defensive coordinator, because that might also open up a few more avenues for another head coaching position for him. But end of the day, man, it just kind of sucks that, again, kind of having that team, while I say turning it around, he didn't get them to the playoffs, but still had them in the playoff hunt when it came to potentially being able to win that division. I think you should at least give that some type of reward, but this is why I'm not an NFL owner or, whether it be majority or minority owner. Not me that gets allowed to make those types of decisions. So, last, I guess, coordinator movement that I had written down here. Mike LaFleur, younger brother of Matt LaFleur, of course, is now going to be the new offensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. So, went from Jets offensive coordinator last year, let go, and then now going to join maybe a little bit more familiar staff there with Sean McVay.
Okay. So it looks like we might get, before Roddy might be coming on here in a few moments, let's do the little bit of the in-between stuff here with the deal with the World Bird Sanctuary and also an event that's coming here soon.
Yeah, so, of course, if you guys are just joining us, this is That's Football here, brought to you by the In The Zone Network, and we're St. Louis, here at the My City, My Music studios. We do this thing every Tuesday, 6 p.m. Central Time to 8 p.m. Central Time. Of course, also sponsored by World Bird Sanctuary here in St. Louis. Of course, if you have not seen or listened to us here in previous weeks, or even seen some of our recent social media posts, we are starting the campaign Let Him Fly, or hashtag Let Him Fly, as it pertains to our friend called the Hawk. We, of course, are trying to get him to fly all of the Battlehawks home games here at the Dome in St. Louis. So, with that, of course, social media tag, call on Twitter, all your social media posts everywhere, hashtag Let Him Fly, so that we can get Carter Hawk at some of those home games live. And before we get to the home games, February 19th, the season opener, we are going to be doing a Battlehawks tailgate and watch party at Cafe Piazza, 1900 Arsenal Street, here in St. Louis, right across the highway from the Anheuser-Busch Brewery. Time, I guess, is TBD, but will be, again, tailgate and watch party for the Battlehawks season opener on February 19th at Cafe Piazza. Plenty of specialty drinks. You're going to have, obviously, plenty of food options. You got the Benton Park Arcade there at Cafe Piazza, which, we could go on and on. You got NBA Jam. You got all the WWE old school vibes with the action figures and things along the walls. You got your skee balls. You got all your traditional arcade games, plus some. Not to mention, we'll have the folks from the World Bird Sanctuary as well as Carter Hawk live on site there at that tailgate and watch party.
Our colleague Rodney Davis here. Hey, Rodney. Rodney? Oh, there you are.
There we go, man.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Going good.
Hey, man, can't call it. How you doing, brother?
Man, I cannot complain. Just glad to be out of the craziness outside.
Yeah, man.
Believe it or not, it's so that, and also it's so cold too.
Yeah,
it's so cold outside. It's crazy.
Yeah,
so cold, man.
Just bring it a little bit with the XFL, because there's actually had some thunder snow down in Arlington, Texas, and all the training camp practices were actually canceled today. That's how bad.
Yeah, man, crazy.
Yeah, so
Stretching out all across the continental United States here with that winter weather. So, um,
basically.
we kind of went around to both of the NFL Championship weekend games, but definitely still want to get your thoughts before we get Howard Balzer in here to join us to talk a little bit more NFL. Now, from what you saw, I guess we can kind of start with the game in the NFC, which was not much of a game for very long given the circumstances. But Philadelphia Eagles, obviously NFC champions now, moving on to their second Super Bowl in 5 years. From what obviously they haven't gotten a chance to go full throttle here the last couple of weeks, but from what you've seen so far in the playoffs with the Eagles, do you think this Super Bowl is a realistic win for them, or is it like, hey, they've kind of had a little bit of an easy road to get here, and we'll kind of see if they can handle the real show come 2 weeks from now?
I think what you see on film from the regular season and then obviously the playoffs is more amplified. I think that they are the real deal. Um, Line of scrimmage is key.
Yeah,
Offensive line is probably the top offensive line in the league. Defensive line, they really get after the quarterback. They're solid across the board, man. You look at all the different positions on that field, and they're pretty solid in each different group, from receiver to running back to tight end on the offensive side, and then they got three Pro Bowlers and potential Hall of Famers on that line. So
yeah.
there's some studs across the board, man. I think they're a legitimate team, a legitimate contender to take it all in a couple of weeks.
Now, do you think that game is any different if Brock Purdy doesn't get hurt?
Honestly, I still would favor the Eagles in that matchup because I feel like
Yeah,
Purdy, to a degree, hasn't played against elite defenses during his run, with the exception of maybe the Cowboys. And the Cowboys, they handled him pretty solidly. He had some big plays throughout, but they pretty much kept him in check throughout. And I feel like the Eagles have a better defense, especially in that back end, than the Cowboys, who had a few different injuries, lost a couple of cornerbacks, so they were definitely weakened down the stretch. But yeah, the Eagles, they seem to have an answer to every question out there when they go up against better competition. So I expect no different. I think they'll be prepared come Super Bowl Sunday.
yeah, man. It's definitely going to be a tough task going against, like you said, just that Eagles team in the trenches on both sides, man. They got one of the best offensive lines in the league now. Granted, Landon Dickerson, I believe, their left guard, had came out of that game on Sunday with an injury. Apparently, is going to be ready for the Super Bowl though. And of course, Lane Johnson was dealing with a groin injury here throughout the playoffs, but team obviously stout up front on offense, and then we saw what that pass rush was able to do against the 49ers on Sunday. Now, I guess switching gears a little bit to the opposite end, you had the AFC Championship game later in the day, Chiefs and Bengals. Will and I talked a little bit about the officiating in that game. Do you think the right team won that AFC Championship game?
It's interesting. I read some comments that Colin Cowherd had made, and it's pretty spot on. You look at that game from start to finish, and the Chiefs, they kind of had their way, especially on offense. They had more total yards, more passing yards. I mean, maybe the Bengals had them slightly in rushing, but it was not a good game on the ground for either team. But I feel like the Chiefs would have found the way. I feel like it's hard enough to beat Patrick Mahomes more than once. To do it three times is pretty impressive, but I feel like at some point he would have came up with the answer to win that game. And then on the other side of the coin, I feel like Chris Jones kind of channeled his Aaron Donald a little bit, like the
Yeah.
Super Bowl last year against the Bengals, and just came up with a clutch play at the end. And I just feel
interesting.
like
It's interesting
that,
that was
that
his
kind of
first
shook up
postseason
things.
sacks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
first two postseason sacks of his career. So
Crazy. Crazy,
came
man.
up in the clutch. So I feel like that kind of changed the momentum a little bit because I feel like Burrow, he's such a stud that he's going to drive the ball down the field and score. And that sack just kind of took the wind out of the sails a little bit.
Oh yeah, for sure. And definitely got to give credit to Kansas City's defense. Like as much as the talk was about the two quarterbacks coming into this game, they went that whole game and only gave up 20 points, which I feel like that's a big win for the defensive side of the ball when you talk about seeing Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, Tyler Boyd, and that Bengals offense. Pass rush was getting home, and I guess this was the first time where those offensive line injuries for the Bengals really started to matter. And Chris Jones, Frank Clark, those guys got to start moving those bodies around. Man, it got real hectic real fast for Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
And so kind of went downhill from there. Now, I of course went out on a limb last week, and I picked the Bengals over the Chiefs, thinking that one, Burrow was going to be able to seize the moment again, but also that Patrick Mahomes may be a little bit more hurt than what we thought he'd be coming out of last week's game, or I guess coming out of the divisional round. Same question I asked Will here. Do you think that Mahomes really had the high ankle sprain, or do you think that injury might have been a little bit less severe than what the Chiefs told us?
I really think it was legit. I feel like we would have saw a lot more mobility out of him and him trying to escape the pocket, much more subdued in that game. And, he beat them from the pocket, which a lot of people, kind of critique from time to time because a lot of his success comes from him moving out of the pocket. But I feel like it's legit. But he's so methodical and so brilliant that he just found the way to get the job done.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, we've seen people kind of compare him to Michael Jordan this week.
And then I think there was the thing after one play, Mahomes was yelling in pain on one thing that wasn't.
Well, yeah, he did. He did have a couple of times throughout that game. I think it was
need to be censored on one of them, but
yeah, of course, he had a few expletives to throw out there for us. Now there was also, I think, play either late in the third quarter or beginning of the fourth quarter where he was having to scramble left and throw, where it kind of looked like, okay, that might be him kind of starting to feel that ankle a little bit. But, of course, when they needed him to get scrambling the most, he was able to pull it off, man. So, Mahomes just out there Mahomesing as always.
Now, one thing that was announced today, Rodney, that if they actually raising the cap for next year from $208.2 million to $224.8 million. And it's increasing almost 10% per year now, it seems.
Crazy.
It is crazy, man. I'm just going to be curious to see how some of these teams manage. I mean, obviously, you have your measures where you structure contracts, but, man, it's ballooning.
I'm trying to remember what team it is, but apparently there was one team that, as of right now, they're actually $55 million above the cap. I can't remember what team that was.
It might be the Bears. Because I know the Bears, from what I've read, they are going to be close to 100 million under pretty soon here.
And
so
looks like our special guest Howard Balzer is on here. Let's admit him here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back again to That's Football. NFL writer, covers Arizona Cardinals, also covered many years here in St. Louis with the Rams and Cardinals as well. Howard Balzer. Hey, Howard, how are you doing this evening? Hold on, something's wrong here. Hold on.
Maybe dismiss it.
Howard,
can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Hello.
Yeah.
How we doing?
Pretty good.
Well, definitely great to have you back. Of course, a lot going on in and around the NFL world this time of year. And, of course, we got to start with your current home, Arizona right now, the Arizona Cardinals. I guess just kind of going right into it. Last time you were on here, we asked you if you thought Cliff would, keep his job throughout the season. That turned out he kept his job for the end of the season, but, of course, was let go at the end of the season. What have you heard so far about that coaching search and kind of what they may be looking for in replacement of Cliff Kingsbury?
I'll tell you, it's all over the place right now. because with the news that Sean Payton is going to the Broncos, don't know. I think it was as much Sean Payton picking the Broncos over the Cardinals. I think that's what eventually led to this happening. The Cardinals wanted to talk to D'Amico Ryans, but he canceled an interview, which weirdly was scheduled on the day of their first playoff game. I think at that point, he probably had come to the conclusion that he was going to be the head coach of the Houston Texans, and that became the case also. They gave a second interview to Dan Quinn, who then came out within 24 hours and said he was returning to the Dallas Cowboys. So, and let's remember one thing too. According to reports, the Cardinals offered their general manager job to someone else, a guy by the name of Ian Cunningham, before offering it, and he turned them down. And then they offered it to Monty Ossenfort, who took it. So I think that it's fair to say that this is not a real attractive job at this point. And my own personal feeling is that a certain amount of that centers around Kyler Murray. And any coach, I mean, here's Sean Payton figuring, and he had conversations with Russell Wilson during this whole process. And obviously Russell Wilson, despite not playing great the last 2 years, is obviously an accomplished quarterback in this league. And I think there's a big question from anyone taking this job, whether they want to hitch their wagon to Kyler Murray. And I don't know that any of that is truly personal, but I think it's tied to his style of play. Yeah. And I know that there's coaches around the league, and GMs for that matter, that don't want those, quote, running style quarterbacks. We've seen the history of injury that occurs with them, whether you go all the way back to Robert Griffin III, whether you go currently with Lamar Jackson, who's been unavailable the last 2 seasons. Heck, we had Brandon Beane, the Bills general manager, come out this week and say that Josh Allen has to start doing a better job of protecting himself because he was playing with a bad elbow for most of the season. And Josh Allen isn't 5'10" like Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
And so here you have a situation with the Cardinals where their quarterback is probably not going to be able to practice until the earliest October, coming back from a torn ACL. And here's the numbers that I cite all the time. I'm amazed, guys, to a degree that hardly anybody in this town talks about this. They talk about Cliff Kingsbury. They talk about Steve Keim and his drafts. They talk about all these coaches, and no one ever raises the point, well, do these guys want to coach Kyler Murray? And the reality is, and these are the numbers I cite, nothing to do with completion percentage or touchdowns or rushing yards. The number is 6. And that's the number of injuries that Kyler Murray has suffered in 4 seasons in the NFL, and 5 of them are to his legs. And there's evidence that, well, the last 2 years, not this season, not this past season, the 2 seasons prior to that, he played at the end of the year with a shoulder injury and wasn't himself because he was protecting himself. In 2021, he suffered a high ankle sprain and probably came back too soon from that and wasn't himself coming down the stretch. And then this year, prior to the torn ACL, he injured his hamstring and probably came back too soon from that.
Yeah. And
I had an accomplished doctor who told me that torn ACL, because it was the hamstring and the torn ACL were the same leg. And so I was told that if there was still general weakness in the hamstring when he came back, that could have helped contribute to the torn ACL. So bottom line is, he's still a young guy, but he's got to rehab from this injury, and then we've seen how many injuries he's had. And so like I said, I just believe that there are coaches now. Especially now, look what you're doing. You're looking at, unless they hire Brian Flores, who has some head coaching experience, but whoever they hire is going to be hitching their wagon to Kyler Murray, and knowing that if it doesn't work in 2 years, that coach is probably going to be out the door, because that's the Cardinals' way. They, when things aren't working, they change. That's the history of this organization. They've never had a coach last longer than 6 seasons. And so if I'm especially a first-time head coach, or even a Brian Flores is probably figuring, if I'm going to take another job, I want it to be the right fit, because they know that this might be their only shot. And for Flores, it might be his last shot to be a head coach. And are you going to take the chance on, putting all your eggs in the Kyler Murray basket? And like I said, I think this is the huge elephant in the room for this team now, and hardly anybody wants to acknowledge it.
Well, definitely the elephant in the room, and and thinking about it, you mentioned not wanting to necessarily hitch your wagon to Kyler Murray long term, and even for some coaches, you probably have them hesitant to hitch their wagon short term, knowing that season one is probably going to be down the drain before it even starts, knowing that you're without your starting quarterback.
Exactly right. And there was, I was laughing out loud at this revelation yesterday that Ian Rappaport put out there about, well, he's being told that Kyler Murray might not be available until halfway through the season. Well, you know what they say, no, you know what, Sherlock? I reported that a month ago.
Right.
That even if he's able to start practicing in the early part of October, then he still has to practice, obviously learn a new system now, and then when is he going to be okay to play, and when is he, and what a doctor told me on that one was it'll be probably at least until midseason, until his quote was, Kyler can be Kyler. Because, a lot of people say, well, Joe Burrow came back really fast. Yeah, well, Joe Burrow's not a running quarterback. Right. Now, he can run, and he has shown at times that he has the mobility to make some plays, but that's not the essence of his game. Yeah. A big essence of Kyler Murray's game is that ability to run the football. And so you're not going to go out there until you know that knee is strong and you feel right. And so, like you said, that's probably not going to be until halfway through the season. And so, new coach going to come in? Are they going to play Colt McCoy? Are they going to try to get another different veteran quarterback to play at the start of the season? But who's that going to be? Any quarterback worth his salt that wants to be a starter in the league is going to want to go somewhere where they're going to be, quote, the long-term starter. So who are you going to get that would come in here and know that they're only holding the clipboard until Kyler Murray is healthy? Now, there'll be a quarterback you can get, don't get me wrong, but an accomplished one that you feel comfortable at winning games, man. And they've got so much to do on the offensive line. I had a story today on the website that I'm writing for, gophnx.com. Here's an amazing stat. And I pointed this out all year, and I always get pushback from people who say, well, injuries are an excuse. All teams have injuries, and the usual blobber that people come up with when you talk about injuries. Well, the Cardinals, their offensive line was decimated this year. And so even when Kyler Murray comes back, you better have an offensive line that can protect them. But the Chiefs and the Eagles, the two teams in the Super Bowl, the Cardinals played 12 different, not just played, had 12 different offensive linemen start games this year. 12 at 10 different line combinations. You know how many different line combinations the Eagles and the Chiefs have had in 19 games? 3 the entire year. Yeah. They've started 6. They've only started 1 player other than their starters in any games this season, and those were 3 games that were missed. The Chiefs had their 2 guards miss a total of 3 games, and their backup named Nick Allegretti came in and played those 3 games. One at, I think it was 2 at left guard and 1 at right guard. And then for the Eagles, their 2 tackles, Jordan Mailata and Lane Johnson, they missed a combined 3 games, and their backup Jack Driscoll played those games at left and right tackle. That's it. So does anybody think that maybe just maybe a big part of the Chiefs and the Eagles' offensive success is the fact that they have continuity and stability in their offensive line? And the Cardinals don't have that. They got to find a left guard. They've got to find a center. They've got a lot. They've got a lot to do in this offseason. And I think some coaches might be looking at that and saying, boy, I don't know if I want to enter this landmine.
Definitely understand that. And so I guess going back to, you mentioned new GM, Monty Ossenfort, who was brought over from the Titans organization. And I guess even before we get directly to him, I guess kind of walk me through the weird situation that happened with Steve Keim, where he is, at 1 second going out on an extended leave of absence, where you got, interim guys, Adrian Wilson, and I forget which other player personnel staff that was going to be filling in for him. And then next thing you know, they're hiring a completely new general manager. How exactly did that situation come to play? And I guess what now are the expectations for Monty as he comes and kind of tries to right the ship a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, well, with Keim, like you said, that all happened I believe it was right after the 49ers game in Mexico City that the Cardinals played, when it was announced that Keim was stepping away on a medical leave. And then when Cliff Kingsbury was fired the day after the season, the way it was announced by owner Michael Bidwell was that Keim, informed the organization that he was departing to concentrate on his own situation. Now, we don't know what that medical situation is. There's many rumors. There's speculation out there. Many people point to the fact that 5 years ago, in 2018, he was arrested for extreme DUI. And so that leads people to jump the next step and say, oh, there must be something going on with that. But we don't know. We don't know. But the bottom line is he's not with the organization anymore. So the Cardinals went out and hired Austin Fort. Like I said, they interviewed several other people. They hired him. He's brought in a guy from the Lions who'd been their director of college scouting, a guy named Dave Sears, to be the assistant general manager. And both guys, from all indications, have been very solid personnel guys in the league. But bottom line is Monty Ossenfort has never run a personnel office. He's never run that personnel department. Yeah. And I often point out, guys, that obviously everyone always points to the general manager of a team and puts it all on that guy as if they're the wizard of whatever, and that they do it all and do all the scouting and all that. Well, I counted this up, and this is no different than most teams. The Cardinals, with Keim around last season, had 10 personnel executives. Those are guys like director of player personnel, director of pro personnel, assistant, whatever it might be. 10 personnel executives and 13 scouts. So the general manager, when he comes in, he has to, form that office. The one negative, if it can be a negative, is that you can't have many changes there. I mean, because the scouts have already, you have to count on your scouts that are there already, who have done all the work on the draft that's coming up in whatever it is, a little less than 3 months, right? February, March, a little less than 3 months. And so you've got to count on those guys for the work they've done. He's done some work. Dave Sears has done some work. But these personnel departments are not one or two man shows. Sometimes I think that people have that perception that it is. So, and those contracts of scouts and personnel guys normally run through May 1st after the draft. And that's when you can really start looking around and get guys from other teams, depending on contract situations and all that. But when you come in at this stage as a new general manager, you've got to pretty much go with what you got through the next draft. And so some would see that as a negative. I mean, I think the Cardinals probably have